Alright guys, today I'm going to be giving you what I think is the best coaster for every B&M model there is, with the exception of any sort of family coaster, because we don't want to promote those, alright? I'm going to give you my pick for coasters I've personally ridden, and I'm going to predict what the actual best coaster of that model is. So without further ado, let's get right into it. And we'll start off with the dive coaster, because it's a pretty mediocre model. Definitely one of their worst. The best I've done is definitely Griffon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. It's got the old restraint so you can actually get airtime. It's got one little kink before the final brakes that makes it better than SheiKra. And yeah, overall it's a fun ride. Definitely nothing crazy, but it's solid. Now, the best in the world, I personally think it's pretty obvious. It's definitely Baron 1898. This has by far the best theming, which really makes a dive coaster. It's not quite as cool as how Oblivion the Black Hole, or Oblivion itself, drops into the black hole, but it's still a really cool drop. It's got all sorts of pre-shows. It's got a theming element right before the lift. It's got a decent layout after the drop too, which is rare. So yeah, I definitely think Baron 1898 looks like the best dive. Now, we'll get into the wing coaster. The best I've done out of the two I've done is Wild Eagle, and I definitely like it a lot more than Gatekeeper. It's a lot more forceful than Gatekeeper. You actually get decent airtime on the first drop, which was surprising this past visit. But yeah, it's got good airtime, and it actually made me gray out for a bit. It's actually a really solid ride, so definitely don't sleep on Wild Eagle. But the best wing coaster, in my opinion, definitely looks to be Falcon. It's just massive. Just nothing about it looks like it wouldn't be the best wing. It's got all sorts of great theming. It just looks like a masterpiece for a B&M wing. Now let's get into the B&M Flyer. This is definitely their most overrated model in my opinion. A lot of people really like these. I personally think these are pretty much duds. However, there is one in particular that looks really good, but I'll get to that in a bit. The best I've done is Tatsu at Magic Mountain. It's a fun ride. It's like a nice 6, 7 out of 10 in my opinion. It's like on par with Gatekeeper. But to be honest, it really doesn't pull that many good forces. It's really graceful. The pretzel loops on these things are always extremely overrated. It baffles me how people can call these some of the most intense elements out there. But Tatsu's still a pretty fun ride. Now, Flying Dinosaur. This definitely looks like the best B&M Flyer. I know some might say Starry Sky Ripper, but I definitely think Flying Dinosaur looks better. It looks like it could actually have airtime, which is crazy to think for a flying coaster. This looks like it could be the flying coaster to actually impress me, who knows. Now let's move on to the B&M Hyper. Most people consider this one of the best, if not the best in some cases. I am separating this from the Giga. And for the B&M Hyper, both of these picks are going to be Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia, which is by far the best B&M I have ever ridden, period. I don't see how any other B&M on the planet right now could beat Goliath. It's just so good. You have great ejector airtime, which is pretty much the only B&M that can say that. And it has the only element that's ever made me black out. Now, given I went 11 hours without eating anything that day, so that might have contributed, but still, like, that's impressive. It's just such a good ride, and it's going to take a lot for any B&M to ever beat this, especially given the direction B&M's going. Yeah, it's just sad they're probably not going to make a ride like this again. However, let's move on to the second best B&M I've done, which is Pipeline the Surf Coaster, and yep, this is winning Best Surf I've done and Best in the World, because it's the only one. So we don't really need to talk about this one for too long, but I still think it's amazing. Great floater and ejector airtime on this ride, kind of a mix of both, and it's just so unique feeling. No other ride feels like this. One other that I'll get to in a minute sort of feels like it, but not really to this extent. It's such a bizarre experience. It's truly something you have to experience for yourself. Now, let's move on to the less perfected version of the surf coaster, and that is, of course, the stand-up coaster. A lot of people dread these. I sort of used to, but I've kind of learned to ride them, and I will tell you, Georgia Scorcher at Six Flags Over Georgia, yet again, another Over Georgia B&M, this is why their B&M lineup stacked, is definitely the best stand-up I've been on and in the world. I mean, not much competition there, but Georgia Scorcher actually has good airtime moments, sort of feels like an older, less intense version of Pipeline in a lot of ways, which is still an amazing ride. It's actually barely in my top 50 over 5 of the 8 B&M Hypers. Yeah, that's how much I love this thing. It's got such an intense layout. It's such an amazing ride. You guys have to start giving Georgia Scorcher a lot more credit because it really deserves it. We're going to move on to the sit-down coaster. Now, once again, the best coaster I've been on, also looks like the best in the world, and this is Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure. Wow, this thing was so intense when I rode it. I only got 2 rides, but man, did that launch hit. That thing absolutely shocked me. One of the best launches I've ever experienced. Top 5 launch for sure. And then the 0G roll coming right out of the gate, just with that full head of steam, charging through it. It just looks so good. And Decepticoaster, I know it has a similar layout, but it's not the exact same. It's really not even close. If you look at the profiling differences, you'll notice Decepticoaster looks way more modern, way more floaty, definitely a lot more drawn out. Hulk just absolutely tears through a lot of these elements. They're way tighter and whippier, which is definitely why Hulk is the best B&M sit-down in the world. Now we're going to move on to the B&M Floorless, and the best I've done may come as a bit of a surprise given that I've ridden rides like Kraken and Medusa East, but I'm picking Dominator. I really like this ride. It's got 2 decent pops of airtime, being the drop and the drop off the mid-course. It's got some pretty intense inversions, definitely nothing too out of this world, nothing that's going to make you go, wow, that was like nothing I've ever experienced. But, you know, they're solid inversions. It's definitely a really fun ride. However, the best in the world, to me at least, definitely looks like Hair Raiser. This ride has one of, if not the best setting on any coaster. It just looks like you get such a good view of the water there out in Hong Kong. And the layout itself also looks amazing. Yeah, it's just one of the best looking B&M loopers out there, really. I can't wait to someday get on it. It's going to be a while from now, obviously, because when I go to East Asia, I've got other priorities besides Ocean Park, but someday I'll get on it. Now, we're going to go over the B&M Giga next, and there's a pretty obvious answer here. It's Fury 325. Some people might argue Orion, some people maybe even Leviathan. I don't know who the hell's doing that, but yeah, it's a pretty easy answer. I personally don't even have Fury in my top 25. I'm sorry. It really is just a glorified B&M Hyper, but it's not even better than the best B&M Hyper because Goliath absolutely runs circles around this thing in my opinion. It's still a really fun ride, good sense of speed. It's got a pretty good ride length, some floater airtime, but just nothing that makes me go, this is an elite coaster. Nothing that's even close to that for me. And now we've reached the final model. This was probably the hardest for me to decide a winner in terms of the coasters I've been on because both Montu and Alpengeist are extremely close for me. However, I am giving it to Alpengeist just because, oh my god, that Cobra roll's still so insane. Montu's more consistent, but Alpengeist just has that one insane element that really sets it apart. Now, I think deciding the best in the world was also a bit of a harder task than I was originally thinking, because originally Pyrenees was the easy answer, but the more I look at it, the more I'm convinced that Nemesis Reborn is the best B&M invert. It's got definitely the best theming out of any of them. I mean, if you look at what Alton Towers did, it's amazing what they did to this area. The Nemesis monster itself is one of the coolest pieces of theming ever. And the ride interacting with the terrain is amazing, and the layout itself absolutely hauls. You get insane whip from the looks of it. It's a shorter ride, yes, but I think despite how intense Pyrenees looks, I think the uniqueness and just the sheer creativity and how tight these elements are will make Nemesis Reborn the best B&M invert. Let me know what you guys think of these picks down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.